Hey guys, it's Eric with Painting Business Pro, and in this video I want to talk about using employees rather than using subcontractors. So if you've been watching some of my videos, you'll know that for our company we use subcontractors, and I train and teach people how to use subcontractors because there are a ton of benefits to using subcontractors, which I'll highlight as we go through this video. But in the event that you're someone who uses employees, or maybe you're in a smaller market where it's hard to find subcontractors, so you need to use employees, or maybe you just prefer using employees, or maybe you have some sub-crews and some employee crews. Either way, I want to talk to you about some of the principles that you need to follow if you're using employees to ensure profitability and ensure just the health and success of your business with using employees. All right, so the main downside to using employees is your ability to manage and ensure your profit margin. Okay, so the nice thing about using subcontractors is when we book a job for $3,000, we say, hey, Mr. Subcontractor, I'll pay you $1,500 for this job and you're gonna buy the materials. And so I know that I'm gonna make a $1,500 gross profit on this job. $1,500 goes to the sub, $1,500 goes to us, and we use that $1,500 to pay for our marketing costs, our overhead, and other things like that and keep our profit. Now, when we're using employees, we also want to aim for 50% to labor and 50% to materials. So 50% total for labor and materials. Now, when you're managing employees though, that's not a set number because that's not how it works. So there's three things that you really need to manage from a cost standpoint when using employees to ensure your profitability. So the first thing is you need to manage your labor cost. Your labor cost is going to be your total amount paid to your employees plus your burden. So that includes your workers' comp as well as your payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are typically going to be 6 to 8% of the amount you pay your employees. And workers' comp is going to be about 8% of what you pay your employees. So at least for the painters. All right. So your labor cost includes your labor amount plus payroll taxes plus workers' comp. And then you have your material costs you need to manage. And you need to make sure that your labor cost plus your material cost comes in at 50%. Now here's where you can get into a lot of trouble as a business owner using employees. If your employees are not efficient with materials and they use too much paint, or they use too much plastic or tape or paper because they're just inefficient and they're just being wasteful, this can really drive your material costs up. And it's really easy to accidentally go 5% over on material costs. Now, that's where you can kind of really chip into your profitability in materials. If we talk about labor, when you're using employees, if they go over budget and they take 5 days on a 3-day job, that can basically wipe out your entire profit margin. So you need to figure out a way to make sure that your employees are incentivized to hit the numbers that you want to hit. All right, so for labor, there's a couple things we can do to help us hit our labor costs. The first thing is we need to provide incentives to our employees to hit the budget. All right, so the best way to do this is to not pay your employees hourly. See, if you've got 50 hours budgeted for a job and you're paying your employees for you're paying them hourly, if they work 50 hours, you hit your budget and you're good. But if they work 60 hours on that job, that's a 20% increase in your labor cost, which means typically if your labor cost is like 30%, that's 36%. You just went 6% over budget on labor because they spent 60 hours instead of 50. And that is really easy to do. So now we're 6% over here, we're 5% over here, we're 11% over on our costs for production. Now that might not seem like a huge deal, but when you're running $1 million company, that's over $100,000. That is significant. All right, that is a big deal. And you're really going to have trouble having a really big company if you can't keep these margins at 50%. So you need to create a reliable system for making sure that your labor costs come in on budget and your material costs come on budget. One other thing that you need to manage is your equipment. All right, so this is another bullet we dodge when we use subcontractors. We don't have our own equipment. But when you're the employer and you have employees, you're providing the equipment. And if your employees don't take care of your equipment, that can cost you a lot of money. If they don't clean the sprayer at the end of the day and you've got to take your sprayer into the shop to get fixed, that costs money and it can cost downtime on the job. If your employees aren't changing your spray tips fast enough, that can lead to being really wasteful with materials. If your painters are leaving a brush out in the sun for 45 minutes during lunch because they didn't clean their brush well, you've got a $20 or $30 brush that's getting ruined and needs to go out the window. If they're not taking good care of your equipment, it's gonna break down, you're gonna have to replace it, and that's not something that we really budget for. And that's gonna end up becoming a material cost on that job, which again, really drives up your costs and drives down your profit margin. So for equipment, so here's our solutions to this stuff. And the best solution, in my opinion, is to use subcontractors. But there are some things that you can do if you're stuck using employees, which I did for the first 5 years of my career. I used exclusive employees, and this is how we did it. So the first thing is you need to provide incentives for your employees to finish the job quickly. The best way to do this is to pay your employees a set dollar amount for the job. Don't pay them hourly, pay them per job. All right, so when I bid a job, if I know I bid the job for 50 hours, and I budgeted to pay my guys $18 an hour, then I'm gonna bid, I've got $900 estimated for labor. So I'm gonna pay my employees $900 on this job, whether they finish it in 1 day or 10 days. All right, so when you pay your employees per job, they have an incentive to get the job done quickly and efficiently. When they have an incentive to get the job done quickly and efficiently, your incentives are aligned. So now when you're working with your team on improving their efficiency, and you're trying to coach and help your employees be more efficient and get the job done quickly, they actually care, because when they finish a job ahead of time, they make more money. So if they finish this 50-hour job at $18 an hour in 40 hours, they're gonna end up making, what is that, $22.50 per hour. So they can give themselves a significant raise by finishing jobs ahead of time. And when they're being paid hourly, they don't have that incentive. In fact, there's more of an incentive to just be lazy and fill up the day. All right, so they really have no incentives, and you're almost guaranteed to go over budget on your labor costs if you don't pay incentive-based pay. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is improving efficiency of production, which we're gonna talk about in the next video. We're gonna talk about some of the things that really kill your labor and materials budget when you're producing a job and how to avoid that. So the next thing is material costs. So the thing that you've got to do with material costs is, again, if you can provide an incentive, that's great. So if you know you have $450 budget for materials on this job, if you end up only spending $400, give your employees a bonus. You know, either give them the $50 they didn't spend, or give them half of that and give them $25, or give them a gift card to dinner. Give them some type of incentive to hit the material budget, because you need your team on the same side with you. You need them to share the same incentives that you share, so that you guys are aligned, you're on the same page, trying to do the same thing. And then what you need to do is you can set up with the paint store for them to send you through email an invoice every day. So anytime materials get bought at the paint store, you need to make sure that there's a memo on the invoice saying which job this is for. And then every day you'll get an email from the paint store with all the invoices for the day, and you simply log those in to the different jobs. So you might have like a little Excel form, all right, where you got a bunch of lines. And so this is job 1, job 2, job 3. Just start logging in the expenses for materials on each job, so you're tracking to the penny how much money you spend on materials on a per job basis, and incentivize and pay your employees to be aligned with that. All right, so these are some of the things you can put in place. The only other thing here is equipment is all about maintenance and taking care of it. So if your painters leave a brush out in the sun, that needs to go against their pay, and you've got to dock their pay for it. So you need to set these agreements up front to ensure that you set the expectation, you train your employee how to fulfill the expectation, and they know the consequences if they don't follow it. So when you're done using a brush, you need to rinse out your brush fully and completely, and in the event that we need to replace a brush, that comes out of your pay. All right, because there's no excuse for ruining a brush, and that will significantly add up to your profitability. Okay, so moving on, so that's kind of the systems we can put in place to help with profitability. Now, some things that you need to do before every job. So before the job, you need to do your budgeting. So you need to know to the penny, like, how much do you have budgeted to spend on materials on this job? Some jobs are heavier on materials than they are on labor, and some jobs are heavier labor than materials. For example, a trim job is heavier on labor. When you're doing the body of the house, it's heavier on materials. So you need to know what your budgets are, and this should add up to, in the big picture, you want to be at 50%, because that's the percentage you need to scale as a big company. So our company that's going to do 3 to 4 million this year will make about 18 to 20% net profit, and we're at about 50% on our labor and materials. If we were at 60%, we would only be looking to make 8 to 10% on a $3 to $4 million business, which is way too much work for that kind of money. All right, so Budgeting. So you need to come up with what is your material budget beforehand so you can set the incentive for your team. You need to come up with what is the labor incentive before, or what is the labor total. So how much are you going to pay your employees on this? And you need to take into account here the burden as well. So if you're paying your employees $900, your burden is going to be something like 16% of that. So your total is going to be something like $975, or I guess it'll be a little bit more than that. It'll be a little over $1,000, $1,075 or something like that. All right, so you need to come up with your budget beforehand and write up a job folder so the employees know how much they need to spend, they know how much they're going to earn. That's the first thing you need to do, is you need to have a game plan for how you're going to do it, or a budget for how you're going to do it. The second thing is you need a game plan. All right, so you need to look at this job and you need to write up a game plan to be hyper efficient when producing this house. And so we'll talk about efficiency and production in the next video, which will be useful for anybody who's running employees. So if you're a subcontractor and you have a couple guys and you're managing production on a job, this will be useful for you. And if you're a business owner managing your own employees, this will be useful for you too. And we'll cover that production efficiency in the next video. And what we really want to be aiming for is daily progress. Okay, so we want to make sure that we know what needs to get completed day by day of this job so that on day 4, halfway through the day, we finish the job. So you have little milestones so we can map the progress. If you're just starting a job today and you're like, we need to be done Thursday afternoon, there's not enough checkpoints along the way to get there. It's just like if you're mapping a 6-day, hiking trip, you need to know where you need to be each day by the end of the day so that by the 6th day, you don't have to do half the trail on the 6th day. Same thing here. You need to make sure that you don't have half the house still left to paint on Thursday morning. So you make sure you're hitting your milestones along the way by making a really good game plan for efficiency and daily progress. Then the last thing, which we kind of talked about up here, is the hours and pay. So what is the total pay these guys are getting and what is the material incentive? All right, and then you need to track this in incredible detail. Now, just to kind of circle back to what we talked about at the beginning, this video is why we use subcontractors. When you use subcontractors, you don't need to worry about labor costs going over budget. You don't need about material costs going over budget. You don't need to worry about managing equipment. You don't need to worry about calculating the burden. You don't need to worry about making a game plan. You don't need to worry about efficiency, because your subcontractor, essentially, you're delegating all of this to your subcontractor. Now, if you are a subcontractor, these videos are going to be really good for you, especially once we get into the next videos about how to produce efficiently, what kills budgets, and how you can manage your crew to be effective at producing jobs quickly and efficiently and not being wasteful with materials, with equipment, or with their time. So we'll see you in the next video. And if you have any questions about this, just drop them below. But the main point of this video is make sure you pay your employees incentives. You need to pay them incentive pay. You need to give them incentives on materials. And then you need to track both of those things on a daily basis to ensure that you're not going way over budget and killing your profit margin. So I hope you found this video I hope you found this video helpful. And we'll see you in the next one. Drop a comment below if you have any questions or comments. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next video about production efficiency.